Yo, let's talk about mixing kicks. I recently got a good question from a patron. What do I look for when mixing kicks? So I'll go through the most important things. I'm trying to keep things fairly simple, but there's definitely a few things that I always look for. There's also scenarios where you just have to say that your kick is shit and you're gonna need a new one. But I'll go through the points, the stuff that I always look for that usually make me help me get the kick working. So let's just do this. I have I mean this also this is not genre specific. I have a house loop here. But let's just let me just mute everything else. This is from a full song, but let's just concentrate on the kick and maybe a bit on the bass, but mostly the kick. Let's do this. So let me go on the kick track and let's talk about EQing here. There's I think there's like three or four things when it comes to EQing kicks that I really pay attention to. So I'm going to start with what I think is almost the most critical part in a kick. Let me touch this range while this kick is playing. So you heard how massively much it actually tweaks the like how bold the kick is, like how much it's pushing through the mix. So it's always between somewhere like 500 and 800 hertz. Even if I created this from zero, there's nothing. Usually, there's there's nothing to look for. I mean, you may get some peaks, but I don't look at it. I just create a EQ node somewhere around, let's say 600, and I tweak this. So let's say somewhere around 500 and 800. This is the spot that you want to tweak when you want to control how much the kick body is pushing through the mix. I think this is literally one of the most important frequency spots for any kick in the world. Most of the time when I get kicks, I have to cut this a little bit. I think a lot of, especially house guys, kind of overdo this a little bit. But this is this one spot. Like, if there's anything to take away from the video, if you're already getting bored, do remember this: 500 to 800, and this will help you so much. I get so many house mixes where this range is like way overblown, and the kicks that sticks out too much. So do control this range. One obvious part is obvious the sub, but I don't touch it a whole lot. So just look for where the kick is poking in the subs. I keep it fairly simple, but this is also kind of critical in terms of how much sub you perceive in the whole song. I won't get into the sub or like a bass kick relationship in terms of sub too much. You just gotta find the right balance of what feels good, like how subby is your bass and how subby is your kick. Are they playing at the same time? So low mids around 500, 800 sub. And one also sort of critical is the low mids around 120 and 150. So let's try this. This kick is actually kind of nice here. So I don't have too many issues, but sometimes I need to carve a little bit somewhere around 120, 150. Because for some reason, most kicks and most basses have a little bit too much somewhere around this range. So it's good to look for some congestion around this range. I also do this on the master, so this is a good spot. So often on the master, I kind of, if it feels a little too much, I do this. I do like a boost on the master and scan and really find the spot where it really just kind of whistles or explodes, and I cut there. And one I think I said there's like 4 spots. So one is this. I rarely touch any of the like high mids. I often just see how much this actually. So I often do a high shelf and just kind of mess around with it and see how it affects the kick. One thing, of course, is you need to mix this in context. Ideally, when you have all the instruments going. But these 4 spots are critical, and I probably said in the beginning, I'm trying to keep it fairly simple, so I don't overcomplicate things. This 500 to 800 hertz spot is really critical in terms of like how much you're hearing of the kick. Sub is has the weight, and also if things are really just distorting too much, sometimes your kick may be just too subby, and sometimes it's like it's kind of hard to realize it's there. Sometimes you solo in on it, sometimes you just make the sub a little lighter and you feel like, oh yeah, that's good, that's better. Low mids, often this is like it sounds like sometimes it's like a low mid build up is here, and this has just go for a high shelf. This has to do with sort of the audible part of the snap. These are the 4 parts. I literally never ever control any other parts in terms of EQ. So then what else? Let's see what I have here. So this is let me do this in context with the bass. You heard how much I'm taking away of the high transient and how much it actually gets rounder. Like it gets so much rounder. Let me do it once more. So this delta mode in the Spiff plugin lets you hear what it's actually taking out. So I don't use the delta modes too much. I mostly just, because I know what I'm taking out. I want to mess with the like the high snap. But this allows me to make a kick kind of, well, round. So there's so many kicks out there that are too pokey. If it's too pokey, you just want to make it rounder. And this, especially with the low mid region, these two, and well, the highs as well, these are critical in how much the kick is like pushing through the mix. Once you control these, you're able to control a lot of the energy of the kick. I use these a lot. I'm a nerd with kicks. I just want to make it perfect. One good thought about is like how much the kick should be poking out is like in minimal songs, like really minimal songs, it's sometimes nicer to have a kick that has like really bold, has a lot of body, has a lot of it's very audible, has a lot of authority. But when you have like a really busy mix, it's sometimes nicer to have a kick that's more in the background and it's not trying to push through everything. But do you, be you. And there's another alternative to this Spiff plugin in terms of transients. It's this Transgressor tool by Boz Digital Labs. So you have transient part and sustain. So let me try and set the levels of transients and sustain. Now let's listen how it sounds. This is actually really nice. Let me... You hear how much it actually it literally tweaks the level of the transients. So this is different from Spiff in a way, because the Spiff controls the... you cannot really take you cannot be like, okay, I want to make the transient louder Well, you kind of can, but it's different. It works in a different way. Like here, you can also just pay special attention to any range if you want to. But this actually also has an EQ. So let me try this. Sometimes I get kicks in mixes that sound like this. So here I'm actually EQing the transient. I can also do the same thing to the body, the sustain part. I can even turn transient off. Thought / tip. You could do this in the intro, and once the song gets going, it gets more energy, because now it feels like there's so much less energy in it. Oh my god. So I'm pushing up the sustain part, everything that's not the transient. There's even a threshold to split the transient and sustain. Somehow it often just works. I don't really mess with these too much. Like I said, I want to keep things fairly simple. I don't want to get too nerdy with a kick. It either works or not, and you're just gonna enhance the good parts and push down the bad parts. So this is a good alternative to Spiff. It's a little more nerdy, and you can get like really critical with these. Whoa. Oh, so nice, dude. Too much. So now it's really blending into the mix. The kick is not really asking for a lot of attention. In some EDM styles, the kick is like really overblown. It's like really kind of low, mid heavy. The transient is like super. I don't want to say overcooked because some people want it, but these tools are amazing for that. We're living amazing times in terms of audio processing. So I had EQ and transient, tone. Let me see this, Shaperbox. Let me solo in on it. So I actually had this on. This kick is pretty perfect in terms of its length. But sometimes I get kicks that have this like a woof, woof, like subby tail. And most of the time, unless you're doing trap, you don't need it. Why? When you're limiting the song and you have a subby bass line and you have a subby tail of the kick, it's slightly hard to... It's a little much sometimes. So obviously I'll show you how to sidechain the kick and bass, but sometimes it's kind of hard to sidechain the subby tail because it's not sort of loud enough. So sometimes in master limiting, we often want to go kind of loud and bassy and full. So the subby tail in a kick is often an issue in limiting. So I use Shaperbox for that. But like I said, this kick is not long, but just let me demonstrate to you how this works. Let me make this kick super short. Let's listen to the bass as well. So sometimes I use this to make the kick shorter. There's definitely times when this has been the thing that's nailed the mix for me. Like I'm struggling with distortion and nothing helps. And then I'm like, I have to admit that the kick is too long. I may ask the producer to make the kick a little short, but my rule is you don't need a long kick. If you listen to some great mixes and masters that you have, pay attention to, like, especially when there's like a really good strong mix master kick bass, pay attention to the kick, especially intro. If you can hear the kick isolated, it rarely has a subby tail, so you don't have to do it either. It's for the engineer, it's often a bit of a problem. You cannot hear a subby tail once the song gets busy. It's kind of fine in the intro, but when the bass line gets going, the subby tail is often an issue. So this plugin, the Shaperbox, is amazing for making the kick shorter. It's only kind of annoying when you get like do double kick, because you have to set the length of this, and I've set this to quarter notes. So any rhythm that deviates from the standard 4 to the floor. This kind of doesn't work, or you have to do some automation. And well, I've done that, but for standard house stuff, it works. What else? Let me see my notes, because I keep forgetting. Yeah, Shaperbox is sometimes also nice. It can do a few things. Let me actually make this really muffled so I can show to you what I wanted to show you. Let me do this. This is kind of silly, but... Okay, it sounds really shit, and let's not care about that. Let me copy the Shaperbox here. Let me just do something else. Sometimes I use this noise module. Let me do this. Holy shit, dude. So this creates noise for the kick once it exceeds the threshold. So sometimes when I get like really muffled kick, I've used this to create a little blip for the kick to get some highs, so it cuts better through the mix. Let me mess with this real quick. You see the threshold here, the kick threshold. So I would make it mono and really short, obviously. Maybe it sounds a little silly, but yeah, I won't dive deeper into it, but I'll just say this is it can be useful. Obviously, a good kick has a bit of everything. It has lows, has punch, has some body, and the tops. But as an engineer, sometimes you get kicks that are a bit awful sometimes, and this can help. So it can be a good tool to have. So one thing that has actually helped me many times is literally pitching the kick up and down. Do try it. Let me just do this. Let me cut the clip and let's try this. I'm gonna warp it. Oh, I don't want the Shaperbox here. So a very basic, obvious tip, but man, there's been so many times when I've been spending like half an hour on a kick and I'm like, I don't know, man, I cannot get the right energy out of it, and then I'm just like, I want to try pitching it up and down, and it's been numerous times that it's literally immediately solved all my mix issues. More often than not, I pitch some kicks down a little bit because I don't know why some producers want to go for like a slightly high pitched kick. So obviously it's like when you go really low with a kick, you get more sob. It's a little more, yeah, a little sobby, a little more weighty. So there's been so many times that I've been trying to make, like, I want to make the kick more subby, more bass heavy, and I just cannot. Then I just take the liberty of pitching the kick down. I'm like, dude, it fits perfectly. Also, it's worth trying because sometimes you don't necessarily realize that it could work better until you try. And obviously, kick kind of does have a pitch or not, but also there's been many times when I just want to try it for the hell of it, and then I realized that like even like pitching it down like one semitone may make the kick work better in terms of the key of the song. So it's very worth trying out. And one last thing, which is very obvious and probably everybody knows, is sidechaining kick and bass. Most of the time I do it because it's so easy to do. Let me show you from the scratch how I do it. I have this preset for Ableton Live, so let's start with Pro Q3. So I'm routing the kick into Pro Q3, and after some settings, in the red color here, I'm seeing the kick. So basically the kick frequencies are being carved out of the bass each time the kick hits. So Pro Q3 does not have any time parameters, so technically it's just doing what it can the best way it knows how. But it's never been an issue. But there are other ways to do this, but I always have this on. I really love it because you can literally see the frequencies, and it gives you an idea. The kick and bass here are fairly close. So I do this, and also obviously you can use Ableton Live. Every DAW in the world has a stock compressor these days, so now the kick is like the whole signal is being, like the bass is stocking, like the whole bass signal is making room for the kick. So sometimes I combine this a little bit. And I also have a preset for Pro C too. Let's take a look. Let's route the kick in. So obviously this goes way deeper than Pro Q3. So what do I have here? There's many compressor settings. I will not go into these. So here, let's take a look at this. You see at the top, I like Pro C because you get visual feedback of what's happening. See this? Now I'm creating more of a pump because you see that it's ducking deeper. The release is very fast. You also get this. This is not the actual EQ, but it kind of is, but it's for the side signal. So I set the compressor to react to the subby parts of the kick only. So because that's that's the problematic part. If you have any problematic parts, so this is also I love it because it's just so nice to look at. So that's for the kicks, and I'll just say, if these don't make the kick work, you may just need a better kick. There were some times that I used a Slate digital trigger to layer a kick, but most of the time I just I don't want to do it. There's been a few times that I mixed some stuff that's kind of rock, where the drums have been kind of shit, and I've done it, but most of the time I try to make the kick work. So let's repeat the things really quick. So EQ wise, this somewhere around 500, 800, this is super critical. Low mid, sometimes you get a bit too much, not every time. If you get like a congestion or the master limiting sounds like it's distorting like shit, it's good to do this on the master and find a spot and do some cuts. Subs for the kick weight, and tops. It has a massive effect on the overall energy because now it's just kind of lo-fi. It's kind of shit, kind of shitty, sleepy. This part, that's the part that's gonna cut through a busy mix. So if you need more of that, this is your friend. Like I don't even have frequencies for this. I just create it, barely look at it in a very nerdy way. Just push it, listen to it in context. And transient. This is almost like the difference between deep house and EDM. EDM is like this. This is gonna tech house, and deep house is like, and obviously it's just not for house, any styles. So yeah, and length also, I made this really short. This kick is kind of perfect in terms of length, but it also you can use this trick to make the sometimes even in my own music I may make the kick a little shorter in the intro, and once the song gets going it gets a little longer, so controls the energy a little bit. So that's mostly it. I'm just saying, if these don't make your kick work, your kick probably sucks. Oh, and pitching, that's the one thing I forgot to repeat. This is very important. If you feel like you've exhausted everything you can do, many times the last resort for me, or the thing that I think of last has been the pitch, and many times out of those times it's actually helped me. So make that kick work. Let me know how it goes. If you have any questions, I'll be here. Thank you.